Hello, I'm Michael Brown, President of the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe. It's my great pleasure to introduce this evening's Creative Thought Forum talk by Ankur Gopal. This online lecture is being presented during the continuing COVID-19 lockdown in New Mexico. It's part of SAR's effort to remain connected with our members and the general public during the pandemic. We encourage you to subscribe to SAR's YouTube channel and register for our e-newsletter, which includes information on upcoming webinars and live streams during this time of social distancing. You'll find SAR's website at sarweb.org. During Ankur's talk, we would welcome information on where you're watching from and how you learned of the event. This can be typed into the chat function that you see on your screen. We'd also welcome questions for the Q&A period that will follow the talk. Shifting to live questions and answers involves some tricky technology, so if there's a problem during the transition, we'll do our best to let you know. Before I introduce our speaker, there are people and institutions to thank. Sponsors for this year's Creative Thought Forum series include the Pelahema Foundation, John Kemp and Michelle Cook, Patty and Arthur Newman through the Newman Zone Foundation, Adobo Catering, Bajarito Scientific Corporation, the Flora Crichton Lecture Fund, Thornburg Investment Management, and the Ethel Jane Westfeld Bunting Foundation. We're also grateful to those sponsors of our individual lecture, tonight's lecture, Descartes Labs, Dan Marians of UBS Financial Services, and Shiprock Santa Fe. Finally, I want to thank our board of directors, members of our Founders Society, and all our SAR members, without whose support this event would not be possible. Ankur Gopal is the founder of Interapt, an award-winning software and IT firm based in Louisville, Kentucky. Gopal and his team were selected to lead a 10-year plan to teach Kentuckians technology skills and build a sustainable technology ecosystem. His work has been featured on the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and Politico, as well as on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Prior to moving to Louisville, Gopal studied entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and attended the University of Illinois. He also performed improv comedy on the main stage at Chicago's prestigious Second City. I give you Ankur Gopal.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the School for Advanced Research for having me today to speak to you on solving the IT skills gap in America. My name is Ankur Gopal. I'm the CEO and founder of Interapt. We are an IT services firm located in Louisville, Kentucky. Not traditional tech mecca, if you will, but we've been able to find success in not only delivering high quality IT solutions for large companies in the Midwest and around the world, but also cultivating and creating a talent pool in places that need it the most, with a lot of jobs being lost to automation, a lot of work being lost to changing technologies and et cetera. And we are very proud of the work we have done in creating opportunities for others in our community and our country. As I mentioned, we are a IT services firm, and to give you our current state, we generally serve a lot of Fortune 500 and 1,000 clients in some key practice areas. These practice areas are cutting edge tech that we've seen come out of the Valley and come out of the coast for many years. We are trying to focus and play our niche in those sort of areas where we see a lot of demand, but not necessarily those sort of services and talent pools were available in the Midwest. So we had to be creative on how we solved our problems and built our company. So in order to solve some of the talent gap problems we had, we essentially created our own training program. We felt we could find diamonds in the rough that had the aptitude, but didn't have the opportunity to learn the skills in the past. And so we would take the onus of teaching and training them. Fast forward to today, we have built one of the first successful IT apprenticeship programs in the country with some very impressive numbers, where we know how to train, to assess people up front really well. We know how to train them in the skill sets that they need for upward mobility really well. And lastly, we know how to employ them really well to where they are able to succeed and thrive and continue a pathway to participate in the tech economy. How we do this is through a couple of key partnerships. One is through General Assembly, who's one of the top tier training partners in the country and the globe, who is constantly updating curriculum, constantly creating new training modules, and constantly working with us and our customers to create these sort of custom pods that are needed to compete in today's tech economy. The way that our company, Interapt, addresses the sort of upskilling piece, so that we build these teams through our apprentice model, and also add senior team members as well as mid-level folks that can kind of create this pod structure, so a team that moves forward together sort of mentality. That's been very successful for us, and we're very proud of the model we have. So what we have kind of landed on to where we currently live is that we are able to say that we're able to sort of kind of cram 3 years of computer science into 3 months. It's an immersive 8 to 5 curriculum. It's every day. You can't really miss a day or two, otherwise you get too far behind. We generally look for people with the aptitude, but not the opportunity. So screening is a big piece of our model. Finding the right partners in the community to be able to give the work. That's what we ask of corporations, to give work to these individuals as well. We train them really well, and then we apprentice them for a 12-month period. Not only are we training them in sort of technology skills through an apprenticeship model, but we also layer collegiate classes in some of our university partners as well, to where we're adding additional skill sets that they can use to thrive in their careers. We also provide college credit for those who want to go back and get a full associate's or baccalaureate degree as well, but we also will work with them. The idea here is that a lot of our graduates of our apprenticeship program aren't necessarily built to carry on a lot of debt, but they can work and go to school at the same time, and we work very closely with building those schedules with them. So I'm very proud of where we've landed on this model that we believe is a game changer for the country. Lastly, I mentioned there's different areas where we can create these pods, and not all pods are created equal. Different roles and different practice lines require different expertise. So a couple examples: if you're an IT support team, if you're on an RPA or intelligent automation team, if you're on a software dev team, it generally requires different pod structures. But we generally see a 4-to-1 ratio of apprentice to senior. That seems to work quite well in our sort of models. But that's where we have come to and what we have landed on, and we're very proud of that. But I think it's an important sort of study to really understand how this came to be and how we've evolved this over the past 5 years to really create this sort of new channel of talent that's going to help communities and companies around the country. So if you look back to where my story sort of started, I was a upstart entrepreneur born in Owensboro, Kentucky. I left Kentucky because that's generally what success usually meant for people in our state, was you left Kentucky and went to the big city, a la Chicago, San Francisco, New York, etc. But after working and after going to school at the University of Illinois and University of Chicago and working at Accenture, where I started my skill set, I decided to start my own company. And I have basically landed on Interapt, where we are an IT services firm focused in next generation tech. So if you look at our history, we've been able to accomplish quite a bit, even though we are located in what we consider a non-traditional tech market of Kentucky. We're one of 10 Google partners announced globally. We have won Business of the Year. We've become a Gartner Cool Vendor, spoken at a lot of national conferences, and all that has been, really helpful in improving the quality and capabilities of being able to do work in Kentucky. One of the things that we've been able to overcome over the years has been the bias and perception of a Kentucky-based high-tech company that has actually been a roadblock for us. We've had to struggle really hard to be taken seriously and competitively with a lot of our peer cities that are in more traditional tech locations. So when we were growing, when I started the company, I believe that being in Kentucky, we could have been one of a few rather than Silicon Valley, where we are one of 10,000. And as we were growing and selling our services work to our customers, which include a lot of Fortune listed companies, they asked us to do more work. And as an entrepreneur, that's a great problem to have. Great, I got to hire more people. Well, that became difficult to do. I had to recruit from all over the country. I remember being on a phone call with this person in Colorado, a person in San Francisco, and a person in New York, and all in one day. And the three reasons they said we wouldn't take the job was because my wife said there's no Nordstroms in Kentucky. I don't believe there's enough startups in that area that in case your startup doesn't succeed, that I could just jump to somewhere else. And three, I've got offers in 17 different cities. Why would I pick yours? So that was really an eye-opening sort of experience for me when I could not recruit at the pace that I thought I could, no matter how competitive I made the package to be. And this has been a problem that you've seen all over the country. We know there's plenty of job openings and the lack of skills to provide them. There's a growing talent gap, as we know, and it's getting bigger. This is just a clear, simple, supply and demand curve that is simple for anyone to understand. We just don't have enough, and there's a war for talent going on all over the country. But nationally, how does it affect just Kentucky as opposed to nationally? Well, we know we have 10,000 open jobs right now in our Commonwealth, and we don't have enough computer science students to fill that gap. Not only are we not graduating them fast enough, but we compete with other markets who are there lured and recruited by larger salaries, larger packages, big city life, etc. So the talent gap is real. So what I did was, instead of me trying to compete for talent, I decided to create my own training program. The schools weren't creating fast enough for me, and I couldn't get the people to stay. So I said, you know what? I'm going to just start finding people that want to stay in Kentucky, but just maybe need a little bit of extra training. And that kind of happened because I remember interviewing a couple of college students that were just graduated, and I'm looking at their resume, and I said, I'm sorry, you don't have. She was an anthropology major. So I'm sorry, you don't have the skill sets I need to work in a tech firm. And she broke down and started crying and said, this is my 30th interview. I've got school debt. I've got loans. And I haven't gotten a job in over a year. And this is my 37th interview. And so I felt for that person. And I said, okay, I tell you what, you look intelligent. And you sound intelligent. Let me just see if you can potentially learn these skill sets, because that's pretty much what I think you're lacking. So I sat people down. I said, I'm going to pay you a very modest sort of intern salary that you can do. And all I want you to do is put these headphones on and take these training modules and learn. So if you can learn in about 3 months what I need, and I'll test you every month to make sure you're making progress, and I'll answer any questions that you need, maybe I can use you as a junior person on one of our projects. So not only did I do that for her, but I did it for another dozen or so people, and it all worked. All of these folks finished the training, learned the skill sets I needed, and became valuable people on the projects. Around that same time, we had our governor and congressman visit our company accidentally because they were looking for a company to sign a technology bill as a backdrop, and we got asked to do it. I said, sure. But our governor wound up staying for over 2 hours, talking to the people, seeing our technology, as you can see here, and asked, how did you find these people? Are they from our local universities? And they said, no, Ankur trained us and he told us what to do. And that's when he was very intrigued, asked a lot of questions, talked to our congressman from Eastern Kentucky. And then on a conference call about 2 weeks later, they asked us, well, can you do that in Eastern Kentucky where you don't necessarily have the same demographic? You don't have college graduates, you have high school graduates, but you have really highly motivated, hardworking people that have adapted to a coal mining economy for generations. And essentially that is the type of person that we're looking at diversifying that skill set. My response was, I don't know. I've never done this before. I barely have done it with my college students. But I said, okay, I figured it's not often that a Democratic governor and a Republican congressman conference call you and ask you for the same thing. So I figured it was worth a shot because I realized if this does work, this could probably affect many lives. So before I agreed to do it, I said, I will go there and do some research and see what it would take to stand up a program. And essentially and also answer the question, do they have the fundamental skills to learn a computer science intensive program? I spent about 3 months meeting with legislators, meeting with teachers, meeting with business leaders, workforce development agencies, and things like that. And after I did all my research, I learned a couple things that were different in the other part of the state from where I'm from, that while it's only a short distance away, it was very, very different in terms of the sort of sociological issues we had. And I came back to the governor and Congress and said, okay, I think it's worth a shot, but here's a couple of rules I have. Number one, the mentality there was an honest day's, honest day's paycheck for a hard day's work. And so I said, people can't take time off of life, so we've got to pay people to learn. So we had to include a training stipend to help cover bills. And they were kind of shocked by that. And they said, well, why? I said, well, because you can't ask someone to learn something hard when they're worried about where their daughter's next meal is coming from, or how they're going to pay rent if I ask them to embark on a 4 to 5 month training journey with me. Because it was evident to me that while there was aptitude there definitely were not able to, people that could take 4 to 5 months off of life. So that was one of my conditions. The other conditions I found were that even if we could train in an environment that may not traditionally be a technology sort of epicenter, but more than that, it lacked an urban density. There was no major city there. The major city was 20,000 people, and that wasn't where we had done our initial pilot, which was Louisville, which is a thriving sort of urban area. But I said we would try it. We embarked on the mission. We said we'll take 50 people, and we started our process. Now, what's interesting is that how we got people interested in our offering. In Eastern Kentucky, college education is viewed very differently than in most areas. It's something that most people didn't traditionally, a pathway most people didn't necessarily go to and return back to the state. So people who left and went to college generally did not come back. Others that stayed there had very deep family ties as well. So we marketed this on late night television and on the radio between 4 and 6 p.m. when people were driving back almost an hour and a half each way. We learned from their jobs to their hometowns that could take advantage of our opportunity. So if you fast forward to how we did this, we had 895 applications for 50 spots. And how we whittled them down was a combination of aptitude, guesswork, and also drive. We wanted to make sure we picked the right people. We didn't take people down a path that we thought they would fail. So we used a lot of data and analytics to kind of drive our assessment application. This is not any different from what many HR departments from large enterprises do. We basically track the candidate. We gave them interviews. We asked them questions. But one of the things we also utilize is IBM Watson. We use human behavior analytics to just see, do they have the sort of drive? Do they have the sort of emotional intelligence to embark on something that's challenging? And we found that in hindsight, when we benchmarked this data against our best performers, it was pretty close, true to form, which was pretty exciting for us. So we measured multiple things: emotional range, aggressiveness, extroversion, conscientiousness, openness, willingness to overcome hardship, open lines of communication, et cetera. So while these were all, sort of subjective data points, or at least subjective sort of ratings, we kind of said this is desirable. Now it's become a lot more objective because we know what the ideal candidate really looks like. So that was pretty exciting for us in terms of how we pick people. The last piece of our application process was to schedule an online interview and meet the admissions team, if you will, for a 20-minute in-person interview on one of these 3 selected days. Because we said if they're not able to, use some self-service tools like scheduling interview, manage their schedule, show up on time, they're probably not a good fit for the class. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the breakdown of each step, we had 5 steps in our process. So how do we get from 895 to 50? Well, on the 895, we found that 47 people either put their wrong email address down to get the application, or didn't check their email in a timely manner to know they got the application. So there was that sort of let's call it a weed out, but it wasn't necessarily meant to be. It was just part of our process. Then we had, of course, the sort of logic interview. Then we tested for typing skills. Then we also had a bit of an emotional interview, like, why do you feel you are a great candidate for this job? And we had some really emotional answers, things stemming from, I want to show my son or my daughter that their father can reinvent himself and take care of his family. We had others who said that, my whole life, I didn't know what else I could do with my career except for either coal mining or working in a sort of a rural economy. I've always dreamed of doing something that allows me to see the world or work in a global economy thing. So we got some very, it was pretty emotional, sort of a roller coaster in some cases in looking at some of these videos, but that's part of the reason we were able to kind of measure the grit, the drive, the desire to take our class. So after doing that, I'm very proud to say we had 35 out of the 50 complete our curriculum, pass the class. And the next step was to, okay, who's going to hire these folks? Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier was the bias that people have had to non-traditional sort of tech areas, if you will. We had that in Louisville. Can you imagine what someone from Eastern Kentucky, from Paintsville, from Prestonsburg, from Licking Creek, things like that, might have the bias? There's a lot of research that shows the bias on zip code in terms of hiring practices. So we knew that was evident. So when we started this process, we didn't know who was going to hire them. But so our company, Interapt, we gave 25 job offers and 10 people found jobs on their own, which to me is one of my favorite metrics to share. And I edited this slide before talking to you all because this is a pre-COVID sort of scenario, as we're still working through this. But one of my proudest things that 5 years later, 34 out of the 35 people are still employed in a technical role, either at my company or somewhere else. They've moved on. They've taken team lead roles. They've gotten higher salaries. I mean, some of our folks on this page who were unemployed 3.5, 4 years ago are now making close to six figures, working in a very healthy tech economy. So that's one metric I'm extremely proud of. And the fact is that after we did that, we got a lot of national attention. We had a lot of folks say, hey, can you do that for us in our community? Hey, can you do that for our company? We didn't expect that, but we said, hey, if we can do it for these people in Eastern Kentucky on our first try, we could probably get better and do more, and we did. So we opened up classes all over Kentucky. We opened them in Atlanta. We started talking to cities about other places. And the great thing is that when you look at the sort of the key factors of success of why an individual can succeed in this sort of 3-month immersive training and 1 year, intense apprenticeship, there's a couple of common factors that don't have anything to do with your race, your gender, your creed, your anything. It has to do with three things. One, it has to do with your drive, right? Are you driven? Are you self-motivated to do this? Two, it has to do with some of your fundamental skills that you have. Some you can learn quickly, some you're just inherently born. If you don't have technical literacy or digital literacy, you've never used a smartphone before, that's going to hinder you just being able to do something like this. And lastly, it was the sort of financial guidance and financial means. Most people had been living paycheck to paycheck or government check to government check. So having the sort of financial literacy around this project where we knew, hey, we can't expect them to do this if we don't cover some of their costs and pay them a stipend at least for a period of time. That was part of it. So we treated this like a job, and we told them, your job for the first 3 to 4 months is to learn. So learning was your metric of performance. If you were keeping up with the material, you're doing it. But the thing is that we've been able to do this in rural America. We've been able to do it in urban America and in West Atlanta. We're doing this in multiple cities now and fine-tune our model. But why do we do this, right? There's got to be, this all sounds great. And people ask me all the time, Ankur, are you a nonprofit? I said, absolutely not. We are a for-profit company. That practices conscious capitalism. There's an ROI and a business reason for what we're doing. We love changing lives, but we also find people who can do the work we need and add the value necessary to basically do great things at our company and for themselves simultaneously. So if you look at our latest cohort, and like I mentioned, we find these diamonds in the rough. We're raising people above the poverty line. When you do that, a tremendous multiplier effect happens. So this is an example of our latest cohort. The average salary was $14,600, which is well below the poverty line, even in Kentucky. In just 3 months of training, their salaries jumped above the poverty line to 35 to 55,000, depending on where they went and what skill sets and how well they graduated. 100% of the folks were placed in roles and jobs because there's a tremendous shortage of people who know these skills. One other thing that we did very well that we've added to our program are wraparound services that we need to really help support the individuals. So, for example, one of our students had housing insecurity and lost their apartment, and it was a single mom with 2 kids, and said, I might have to drop out of the class. We helped guide her. We went to the Urban League. They helped find her another place to live. She was able to pass the class. She is currently making almost $40,000 a year and is able to be a single mom to her 2 kids. And with some of her, by the way, one other nice little side note of that same individual, she has, during the COVID crisis, has started donating money and created a group to make PPE for hospitals and residents that can't afford it. So she's paying it forward in her own way. So I think I'm very proud of that of her as well. But just to give you an idea, the ROI that we see on this, by removing people off of government roles, by empowering them to have upward mobility in their career, by giving them the best first job and a safe environment to fail and to ask questions until we get to a point where they get that level of confidence. Those are all very critical things that we've added into our model that we to do it correctly. And I mentioned that we got lots of international and national recognition for this, which is great and fine, because I want people to know that every community has people that have intelligence and have aptitude and just don't have the right opportunity. That's what the skills gap really, truly is. Some of it doesn't have to do with the fact that someone is lazy. It's the fact that they haven't had the same opportunities as others have had. But when you put that opportunity in front of them, remove barriers and say, this is your shot and it's yours to lose, that unlocks the spirit that you would want in any employee. And we've seen that happen time and time again from all walks of life, and it works over time. We didn't have all sorts of successes without a lot of failures. We learned a lot of lessons. We started using a lot of data to say, where did they come from? What kind of backgrounds do they have? Are there a lot of different nuances between the people we select? And we learned that it's not. It's really just a question of whether they want to get out of this sort of rut they're in, or life they're in, and changes their lives. Do they have sort of the fundamental? Did they finish high school? Did they at least try and learn some additional skills along the way? Whatever. We see those things being the most important drivers to success, not where you went to school, not what your GPA was, and not some of the other things we've historically relied on when hiring or cultivating talent. I'll tell you, one of my graduates I'm super proud of, that when they got their first job offer on Facebook, publicly said, we don't have to be on food stamps anymore. It's the proudest moment in our home in many years. And that really resonated with me, because I believe that there are people out there that may not have the jobs, careers, money that many of us others have, but they want to, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. They're not lazy. They're not incompetent. They are just diamonds in the rough waiting to be found. And that's what I think we've done extremely, extremely well. So the secret sauce, after all the lessons we've learned and all the different nuances and hurdles we've had to overcome to find the right people, support them in the right way, fine tune the model, what do we learn out of that? The first thing that I want to mention is that there's a lot. They teach you 100 hours of how to work at a call center or be a customer support representative, and they call that a tech job. Okay, I'm not going to argue that there's a place for that, but there's not a lot of upward mobility by being just a a customer service representative where you are just essentially handling returns and that. It's absolutely a career, and there's absolutely a place for it. But when you talk about promising someone a tech career, when you hear boot camps and people promise, hey, you learn this stuff and you will get a job, that's that's almost predatory if you're not really seeing the results that the graduates of your school are getting, and we didn't see that. So we believe that about 80 to 90% of boot camps don't fall short of their sort of expectations. And we picked, when we partnered with General Assembly and built our own, and prior to that built our own training, we knew we were in that upper echelon of training because it was hard, it was comprehensive, and we knew anybody who passed it has a career that can go from 40,000 to 60,000 to six figures and beyond. As I mentioned, some of our first graduates are even already proving that to us. So identifying those positions that have upward mobility was critical, and making sure we trained in that. That was one real big thing we learned. And also, when I say we learned to do it in real time, technology is changing, needs are changing. We're seeing change be accelerated even before COVID, but now, even before that, but now even more so. So we are able to change that curriculum, change the training. We actually have the ability to change classes on a dime by being prepared for it. The other thing we do extremely well is we set people up for success as apprentices. Like I mentioned before, IT is not for everyone, and the nuances between in roles in IT are also not for everyone. If you're an introverted sort of individual, you may not want to be on the project management side or the side that requires or the support side requires interacting with a lot of human beings on a day-to-day basis. So we essentially created a matrix that allowed us to basically assess your technical skills, your soft skills, and also your career desires. So this is just one example, illustration of how we've been able to identify people that fit certain roles and set them up for success. So we don't put someone who doesn't like A into a job that requires A, right? So we were very aware of that, and we work with the individual to make sure we're setting them up for the success. And lastly, the third thing we've done is this constant closed loop model we've come up where we affectionately call it our tech talent factory. So when a customer or a company or community asks us to come into their locale and says, what can we do? Sorry. So when a community or a company asks us to come into the locale and they want us to come in and put in a program there, we first decide, okay, let's figure out how we tool the factory line. What skill sets do you need? What skill sets are you looking for? Let's customize and build to that spec and make sure that the output of that factory is an individual that you want. So that's part of the pre-assessment where we make sure we know exactly what we're looking for and tooling for. We then assess individuals to make sure they can fit that those requirements. We then train them to those requirements. We apprentice them on those requirements. And of course, that's when you get kind of ebb and flow into the different roles of an IT dev shop. You get employed very well. We mentor and guide people. People are adding different classes of their own time to learn additional skills. One of our developers now knows about 4 or 5 different languages, and after being able to learn, to be taught by us, and now he's doing it for himself and for others. And lastly, it's the lifelong learning aspect. Gone are the days where you can learn a skill and it'll float you for 30 years. It's just not reality anymore. If you don't keep up with the different trends and the new technology, and even different versions of technology moving that fast, you quickly become a legacy developer if you're not paying attention. So we are looking for people that have the ability to constantly learn, and usually it's motivated by I want to do more. I want to get promoted. I want to make more money. I have these goals that I want to hit. Well, great. Part of that is directly tied to lifelong learning, and we help build those into all of our models. So more importantly, it makes sure that everyone's skills remain relevant to the time and age. What we've taught in 2016 is completely different than what we teach in 2020. what we're going to teach in 2021 and 22. We're constantly fine-tuning our curriculum with General Assembly. We're constantly fine-tuning the requirements with our customers and clients, and we're actually adding all the time to our apprenticeship program to make it better and more robust so people can get a true comprehensive experience in a short period of time. But also, not just companies are we providing these solutions for, but it's a solution for communities and states as well. I mentioned that the impact of what is the real true ROI and what is the true financial impact for taking someone who's making below the poverty level and it's costing the state in health and human services and food stamps and in different programs, potentially increase opioid and drug addiction, potentially higher crime rates, all those sort of data points that we are talking about. We see when you give someone the dignity of a skill that leads to a job with upward mobility, we see that individual morph into a highly functioning member of society and get on that pathway to do that, which inadvertently naturally creates a win-win-win for the community. You start getting tax revenue off that person instead of a person costing you $100,000 a year. All of a sudden they're making $40,000-$50,000 and paying into the tax base. That's a pretty stellar accomplishment in 3 to 4 months, and that's exactly the sort of results we're seeing in our own programs. So I've shared with you what we do now, what we learn along the way in terms of finding the right people, finding the right companies, building the ROI and making the economics of it work, and then also building it at scale. So that's what this future slide is that, you know, a lot of folks come to us and say, you're a replacement. Are you going to put colleges out of business? I say, absolutely not. We're an additional channel for talent and a new pathway. We've partnered with colleges and universities, and we don't teach everything. We teach some things we do to get people employed, and over time, they can continue to add to that skill set and that lifelong learning piece. That's how you properly get people on the pathway to lifelong learning, is you constantly put modules in front of them that they need. You give opportunities for them to evaluate. So with our partnerships with several universities that I've mentioned, we're creating additional programs on top of that. So a lot of the folks that we see, and of course, when we talk about who do we go into companies with, whose problems do we solve on the company side? We solve problems for a couple different leaders in the company, the CEO and CMO, creating real community impact. Some businesses should have an intrinsic sort of bone in their body to help the community they're in. Historically, it's always been shareholder value. We get that, but now as we're seeing the future, employees want to have purpose. Consumers and customers want to buy from companies with purpose and mission. And those trends are being sped up faster in this day and age as we are coming out of the COVID crisis. So human resources officers, we shorten their time to hire. We're not just having them compete in an open market with all the other companies trying to offer 10% more or 20% more. We're saying, let us build you this tech talent factory that always can keep the line going, and we can cycle people in and out of this sort of model for you. Of course, technology officers and operations folks, people who need to remain competitive in a technology-driven world. If it's true, the statement that every company is becoming a tech company, you better have the workforce to deliver and compete in your markets. Otherwise, you're going to be very much at risk of closing. And communities that have only several major companies that don't embrace the next generation of building talent, of competing with and gaining customers the right way, those companies will eventually go out of business or move, which creates even more hardship on communities. So lastly, I'll mention is diversity and inclusion, which is something that we can also talk about. We also embrace a little bit. Diverse teams are more productive teams. We've seen that happen time and time again. Gartner's done a study where diverse and inclusive teams that include people from different walks of life, different gender, different geographic areas, different socioeconomic backgrounds, all those teams add more value to a solution and is a more comprehensive solution that doesn't fall flat on its face when it goes to market. Very interesting. We've seen our own people that come from different walks of life add comments, add suggestions, have ideas, bring perspectives that we didn't even think of growing up the way that we did. So our senior development team has embraced it, saying these individuals that we're bringing in through our Interapt skills and apprenticeship programs are adding value greater than just their technical expertise. It's their life expertise that's really helping us build a better product, build a better solution, etc. So how does this impact Kentucky? This my home state where I was born, from two immigrants with big dreams from India. We are able to compete because now I'm able to prove that we have the aptitude and the people that are able to do the work. We have skills and capabilities here. We just don't have enough opportunity. We believe that we can provide that sort of same benefit for companies that want to explore a onshore model of IT services and managed service provider, meaning that, you know, instead of sending work offshore to India, where we've seen a lot of increased risk due to the pandemic and business continuity not able to be achieved because these companies are not able to work from home, have the internet capacity, things like that. Companies are calling us now saying, we want to de-risk that and want you to de-risk that for us by building these sort of managed services, if you will, in Kentucky, where we have, you know, more comfort in doing. We are able to do that as one, and we have the ability to expand and scale this into multiple cities. A lot of cities have called us because everybody has the same skills gap, opportunity gap, and job losses due to automation and technology. So we've already identified a lot of cities and areas where we are been asked to come in, and we're excited because our model does work anywhere. We have built the playbook we talked about. We track the metrics. We know the data points that really make this successful, or whether we start or don't start. I mean, if we don't go into community, if we don't have a benchmark of digital literacy and technical foundation, we tell them that that's a risk. We don't know if we can, so we can't do this in every single city as much as we'd love to. We've learned over time that we've got to go to cities that actually have employers and corporate partners that are willing to give work. Otherwise, you run the risk of someone being very highly trained and either leaving the community, which is brain drain in a different way, or they just don't get employed, and that of course doesn't help the model. So other areas, like I mentioned, our model is scalable to do anywhere. We have identified a number of cities where we'd love to do this, and we're talking with those places. And lastly, this is something interesting in the time we're living in today. What is all of this that we've talked about today from sort of the anthropological standpoint, as well as the business standpoint? How's it, since everything's going to be impacted and affected, what does that say about us today? What is it? I mean, already before the pandemic, futurists were calling 2020 the decade of change, because they said the world will have more disruptive change in the next 10 years than it had at a rate it's never seen for the past 2000. So those are, if you believe statements like that, I mean, the pandemic is only making this faster. I tell people that what we thought was going to gradually occur over the next 5 to 10 years is now. And unfortunately, that is it. So I'll give you an example, online learning versus in-classroom learning. Right now, there's no in-classroom learning. So you better adapt. You better get to a place where you can learn online and learn in a manner and adapt your senses and adapt you to this, because that's the new normal. We're going to see these types of things become normal place. Simple real estate. We were looking at expanding space for a number of new workers we were going to hire. And now they're all working remotely. So we're rethinking, do we really need enough space? Does that reduce our real estate footprint? So commercial real estate takes a hit because now people are questioning whether it's critical or not. Learning remote tools, learning remote learning makes location irrelevant if you just show up and log in and self-start your work. One other interesting thing we're learning about from some of our employees is that the 15-minute coffee break, where they would just kind of go and kind of unwind a little bit, get a cup of coffee, go walk around the office, go to, a sitting area, whatever. They're actually doing that. Instead of that, they're taking walks with their kids. They're cooking lunch for their family. They're eating with their family. They're doing a number of things, but they're saying this is actually valuable. So even in a post-COVID society, we think that's going to be pretty important to have that balance if you don't already have it in our company. Fortunately for us, remote work was something we've been doing for over 5 years, so it was not new, and we've been able to adapt pretty seamlessly, but many companies are not. Empathy and emotional intelligence. How do you treat someone online versus in person, because you're behind a digital wall? Are you able to be as empathetic and nurturing as and polite, if you will, if because they're not in front of you, versus being behind a screen? So these are some of the things that we're seeing. We talked about pandemic proofing your job as well. I skipped that, excuse me. Pandemic proofing your job. Now, when you go look for an apartment or somebody looks for real estate, they're going to say, one of the requirements I have is a place that I can work, that's quiet, that's got maybe soundproof, that's maybe got a lockable door. I mean, things like that. You are going to see that affect our buying decisions and rental decisions across the board. And lastly, on the customer side, my wife is a dentist, for example, and she's already planning for what does a post-COVID patient want, and part of that will be safety. And so we are going, she's already looking at ways to ensure not only her patient safety, but her and her staff safety as well. When you talk about it, living through a pandemic, not just in a dental or healthcare setting, but you're talking about workplace settings, you're talking about restaurants, you're talking about if I'm going to go to send some of my team members to work on site at a company, do you have a COVID policy? Do you have a virus policy, if you will, that tells me that you are taking all precautions? And if so, how are you proving it? Do you have a camera? Do you record every cleaning instance and timestamp it so I can view it on your website? Things like that are going to become the new normal. And that is, while the pandemic is a terrible tragedy that we are facing, it will be very interesting to see after we get out of this how much change truly does occur in both the workplace as well as in the community. We all know it's going to be vast. We just don't know how much. But with that, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be in your home tonight. I also want to thank the School for Advanced Research for allowing me to speak on this very important topic that we at Interapt are extremely passionate about. Closing the IT skills gap isn't only about solving a business problem for not only us, but also for many companies around the globe that we're working with. It is also our way of helping humanity in terms of finding opportunities that many people don't necessarily have, and also giving them the skills and confidence that they need to participate and excel in the tech economy. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to questions and answers here. I hope everybody can hear. I certainly can. I look forward to first thanking Ankur for a great talk, an inspiring talk. And one of the things, well, there are a bunch of questions that have come in. Okay, we're going to questions and answers here. I hope everybody can hear. I certainly can, and I look forward to. One question that's been asked is, what happened to the young woman who was the anthropology major, one of your first employees? And I asked this both as a former anthropology professor, 35-year anthropology professor, and as the father of a college junior, Emily Brown, who's a sociology major and is watching this from Western Massachusetts as we speak. Is she doing okay?
She's doing more than okay. She worked with us for a short period of time, went out west with her boyfriend, now husband, and is driving. I have not talked to her in some months, but I know she was getting interviews and job offers left and right. I usually hear from some of my previous graduates from time to time. So it's really wonderful to watch them even leave our company, which we were disappointed that she did, but we were rooting for her all the way. So you're seeing people kind of take what we give them and run with it. In fact, some cases sprint with it. So that's pretty fun to see. So she's doing extremely well. If she's listening, I'd like to hire you back whenever you're ready to come.
It's good to know that anthropology can pay off even with some additional training. A related question is, do you have any data on how many of your, I take it that in many cases you're working with municipalities or regions that definitely want these newly trained people to stay in the community. So, but you just mentioned a case where she took her education and ran with it. So what's your sense of how that's going so far?
Yeah, and I think that's, she didn't leave because she didn't like being here. It was a life reason that took her out west. Family reason with her significant other. So that's going to happen. There's always a risk. People say, "Aren't you worried about training?" Because we're one of the major sort of investors of the training in many cases, but we have partners that we work with as well. But people ask, "Are you worried that people will just leave, take your learning and leave?" And I say, that's always a risk. But to be honest, we believe that the culture of our company, the mission that we have of not only creating a profitable business and impact the bottom line properly, but we also want to help those that are maybe less fortunate at the same time. That actually helps us keep people. That actually helps that sort of environment we create where we nurture and we let people fail fast. We don't walk people out because they made one mistake. And in fact, most of our senior team is motivated and incentivized to lift up those that are on their teams. All that really keeps us competitive and keeping that talent wherever we are located. We don't lose a lot of people, definitely not enough to where we have to, worry about the attrition piece. I believe that if you do good business and you keep steadfast in your message, that people will want to stay. And if you don't want to stay at our company, that's fine. We'll make more. That's kind of the mentality we have, and we'll be proud of you when you leave. To your question about the communities, though, some people, so that's a big worry for some, because there may not be a lot of opportunities for next generation jobs. Like I mentioned in my talk, that success used to mean getting out of Kentucky, and here I came back. That's generally refers to not being able to fulfill your career aspirations and fulfill your career goals in the place you're in. That's kind of where that started from. But then eventually, with the tech economy being, able to be done anywhere, the globe is shrinking because of the internet and all the different sort of technologies we've seen and adaptations we've seen. Communities are really understanding that people can work at jobs in California or New York, but still live there. So these communities have to also compete to keep talent. Meaning, if you're not investing in your community, if you're not investing in people, if you're not really trying to make it to where it's an attractive place for people of all generations, that's a problem in some cases. And usually, we're not a good fit for places like that. But those that are looking to reinvent, modernize, potentially, punch above their weight a little bit, those are great fits for us, because we see a lot of synergy where we fit really well.
Sure. Ankur, a lot of your photographs showed people in a classroom setting, and yet towards the end of your talk, you're really talking about feeding the classes to people's homes. So how's that going? What's the ratio of the sort of group versus individual training?
I guess nobody puts in their business plan or strategic forecast, here's where the pandemic starts, right? So we kind of learned that the hard way, like many businesses have done and had to adapt. Fortunately for us, we've been working remotely for many years. We've historically conducted most of our training in class and in person. We find it to being effective. Now we have no choice but to go online. And the metrics that we have been seeing from not only our students, but also across General Assembly's classes around the globe is that the online class has extremely similar or sometimes even better outcomes and than just an in-person class. So we're excited about that, and we're continually doing it. We definitely think there's going to be some different hurdles to address. You know, for example, I'll give you a simple example. When you have a class, one of the things we made requirement in our classes, we had to be on a bus line or transportation. There had to be public transportation because a lot of our folks commuted that way. Well, now the same hurdle is that you better have a strong, a powerful enough internet connection to be able to download and upload. So that's a different type of problem. You have last mile insecurity versus transportation insecurity, right?
Yeah. So the venues where you were teaching, I mean, were these rented from community colleges? How did you find these locations?
Yeah, I mean, it has varied for sure. For example, in Atlanta, we've got a phenomenal partner called City of Refuge, who has built just 1 mile from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta, has built a campus that services hundreds of people that have been victims of sex trafficking, people who have had bad luck in their lives, made poor decisions, had issues that have prevented them from reaching their full potential, and they take those people in. When we met them, I met the founder, Bruce Steele, who's a force of nature, and he said, you need to come to Atlanta and do this class there, because he had historically been training people in food service, hospitality, security guard, auto mechanic. They had a lot of vocations that were doing great, and they were, really creating great opportunities for some. But he said, I need something with a little more upward mobility. I want something a little more career focused that really gets people kind of rocketed out of their lot in life. And so that was where we stepped in. He provided the space there. So we have partners in the community that generally will provide us space to do it. In other situations, we did partner with a community college that gave us space. Most recently, the best sort of environment we had, we partnered with the University of Louisville in the west end of Louisville, which is kind of Renaissance area as well in our community. They had built a beautiful new campus that's really met our requirements and was a great learning space for our folks, as well as from a commuting and from a kind of ease of getting there and being comfortable there. It was near many people's homes and addresses, and it was easy to get to.
Sure.
So generally, that's how we have historically done it. We've had companies that have asked us to train in their campus for them. So sometimes we're training people directly for a client of ours. So we've done training on their premises as well. So we're very nimble and flexible on where we can be, as long as we have the right facilities and technologies needed.
But when you're delivering the courses or the training to people's homes, you're doing it asynchronously, right? So how do they have connections with individual instructors who have walked
Yes.
them through things? How does that work?
It's a classroom. It's live. You have a virtual instructor. You have chat channels with other mentors, instructional assistants, other engineers that can help answer questions. I'll be honest. I always prefer. I'm a guy who likes to prefer. I prefer learning in real time as opposed to online. But the past 4 weeks, as I've worked from my bedroom with my 2 children outside my door every 3 hours, it seems like.
Yeah.
I've had to learn and adapt, and I've realized, hey, actually, I can learn new things, and I'm actually able to pick it up pretty quickly, which is interesting enough now, because before we had a choice, right? You had a choice of, I prefer in class or I prefer online, whatever it may be. And now what we're learning is that we have to adapt greatly, because no one knows when do classes start again? What will in-person classes look like when we get back? Are people going to be too scared to be overexposed in public for that period of time? We don't know. These are really big questions that are going to shift our society quite a bit. What we do know is that whether people still feel more comfortable in their homes and they start getting used to it, they're going to get better at learning online and virtually, because frankly they have to. Humans will have to adapt, because this is going to be par for the course in terms of learning delivery and distance learning over in the future.
Mhm.
It just the way I tell other people is that what we are seeing right now is stuff that we figured would happen in the next 10 years or 5 years or so, and just gradually shift that way. Now we're having to do in the next 5 days. So that's kind of the analogy.
Yeah, well, I feel for my former colleagues at Williams
No,
College, where I taught, and virtually every other college or university in the country, who have
yeah,
had maybe 5 days to prepare for the half a semester.
yeah.
Uh, it's extraordinary.
This has definitely created instances that are not, you know, that are not fun for anyone. I mean, even, we've had our own challenges, but I can imagine how others have not been able to weather the storm as quickly or as
Sure.
adapt as well. Yeah, absolutely feel for them.
And what about colleges and universities? Do you see opportunities for partnerships there, or do you really feel you're on a different track altogether?
I absolutely do see partnership because, like I said earlier, that we don't teach everything. We don't give you a well-rounded liberal arts degree. I went to the University of Illinois. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I
Sure.
learned a lot. I know that some of the classes I took necessarily may not I use every day, but it helped shape my thinking and help me be the person I am. So I'm very uh, I'm very aware of how important that is for people. But I think that colleges and universities are going to see different models. We're seeing more of a stackable credential sort of pathway as opposed to a 4-year degree in one sort of discipline. I think people are learning different things. I think what we're going to see with the university that the ones that adapt well will adopt the lifelong learning and think of like learning accounts. Meaning, if you go to the University of Illinois or University of Chicago or something like that, you can you will be learning stuff now. You'll probably learn some stuff next year. You'll learn stuff 3 years from now. Even after you graduate and matriculate and you go down to your path, you should be able to come back. In our own company, like when we look at utilization models and how busy people are, we bake in time for additional learning. So if you may be working on a client project for 85-90% of your year, but 10% you're going to be learning something new, and we make time and we build that into the model. And I think colleges that do that well and show value, that we're teaching relevant skills, they're the ones that are going to survive and really add value. The problem I've seen with a lot of colleges and universities that I've met with their provosts and I've met with their leaders, I remember one instance where I went in. They said, well, why aren't you hiring more of our graduates? I said, well, your 400 level computer science book was written in 2008, and that was before smartphones were. That's before smartphones were invented, and the book was edited in 2007, written in 2006. So the skills that they're learning, it's just not keeping up, and that's unfortunate. But that's as a business owner, those are things that we have to take into account. The colleges that adapt and are willing to adapt, I think there's a lot of companies like myself that are and groups like myself that want to help and be part of it. And that's why we layer their classes on top of our curriculum, because like I said, we don't teach everything and they teach some things extremely well. And that's where I think that their niche is.
Well, Ankur Gopal, I want to thank you for bearing with us because, as you know, SAR, like your firm and like colleges, universities adapting to the COVID-19 situation, we're experimenting with some new technologies. We miss our members. We miss the face-to-face contacts that make, with employees and staff members and board members. But for the time being, we're hunkered down. So we appreciate your patience and bearing with us on this, and we're learning every day. And I have to say, I feel very strongly that what the lessons we take from this difficult moment will serve us well going forward, just as I'm sure they're serving your firm. So thanks very much. And again, we promise you a nice time in Santa Fe when you and your wife can actually get here in person, which I hope won't
We
be long in the future.
I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time and like I said, this is a fun topic to talk about. I
Mm.
don't feel like I'm talking to a group of people. It's a little different for the first time as well, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity and to share our story with you all. So thank you very much, and I hope all of you stay safe at home.
Great. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much, Mike.